All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick, dressed in black because of the funeral that was the National Basketball Association last night. We're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the NFL Draft today with Peter King. We're going to talk about everything from the number 2 pick to the other elements of the first round, which maybe haven't been covered as much. So let's bring in Peter now and get stuck into it. Peter, thanks very much for joining us.
Hey, good to be on with you guys. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Let's start with the second pick in the draft because that is where, for all intents and purposes, the draft seems like it will start. There's been some momentum for Will Levis to go number 1 today, but don't think that is necessarily real. So starting with pick 2, now you had Houston taking Tyree Wilson in your mock draft yesterday. A lot can change in 24 hours. Do you still think that Houston takes Tyree Wilson, or is there a chance they take a quarterback?
I don't think Houston's taking a quarterback here. I think they're going to take the best available defensive player. I believe, and in part because, there's a couple of teams in this draft that feel like, there's 2 really good edge players, Tyree Wilson and Will Anderson. And because Houston does not have a single legitimate edge rusher on the roster right now, it's not quite as important as getting a quarterback, but they do not want to force a quarterback when they like the edge rushers better. So I think that they still go with Tyree Wilson here.
Okay, and that intuition that Tyree Wilson fits better what DeMeco Ryans wants to run, or in general, you have a read that they have him higher?
It's basically because, as one general manager told me, Tyree Wilson, and you've got to be a baseball guy, I guess, to get this. Tyree Wilson is a swing for the fences, and Will Anderson is a solid double. And I think that is a good way to compare the 2 guys. Will Anderson is a guy who is as steady and as positive a factor for your team as you could have. But I think the ceiling for Tyree Wilson's a little bit higher.
Can you help me understand something real quick about Houston? They've gone through a weird succession, right? Third coach in 3 years. The guy who was kind of, in the ear of the owner has moved on. Do you get the sense that this is now kind of Nick Caesario's job and opportunity to make these picks? And, if that's the case, what do you think ultimately his plan is to put a quarterback on the field in 2023?
Nick Caserio want to say, is sort of a CIA agent among guys who really kind of keep to themselves and who don't say anything about the draft. Nick Caserio is tighter with his information. He's as tight as anybody. And that obviously comes from the fact that he worked for Bill Belichick, and Belichick would never let anything out before the draft. So I think there's that. And I think Nick Caserio essentially simply does not want to force a quarterback who he doesn't like. Okay. And I don't think that Houston loves. I think they could very well take a quarterback either with their second pick in the first round, either trading up or trading down or staying right there. But I don't think they're going to take one at number 2.
Yeah, that fits with all the mail we've gotten that they have been very aggressively working out Hendon Hooker, who would be kind of that 12 and or trade into the bottom of round 1 spot. So it sounds like then if he's operating with that level of confidence, he's thinking of this as sort of the beginning of his tenure, as opposed to I need to find winning football and I need to do it quickly.
That's the problem with this kind of year, this time of year, I should say. Most teams are going to keep a very tight lid on accurate information, which is why, honestly, the way I do this most often, and I know this is going to sound weird, I don't ask Howie Roseman, what are the Eagles going to do at 10 and 30? I ask the people who know Howie Roseman well.
Sure.
What's your sense of what Howie Roseman is going to do? Howie Roseman's not going to tell me. And, and just like, Chris Ballard is not going to tell me what the Colts are doing. So you talk to people who know Chris Ballard, and that's sort of how it goes at this time of year.
Yeah, I think the other thing too is that everyone expects that Houston's going to take a quarterback and not go into year 3 of the Davis Mills era, but they won't necessarily do that at 2 because they can do it later in the draft. They could also potentially trade for someone like Trey Lance or Mac Jones, or there are other quarterbacks out there. If they do go defense at 2, then the draft all ripples from there. All the mail has been that Arizona struggling to trade the number 3 pick. Do you think they ultimately will find a suitor and a suitor, and who do you think is most likely to go 3 if someone does trade up of the quarterbacks?
I had Tennessee moving up to number 3. I've since been told Tennessee's not going to do that, which, we'll see what happens. And again, honestly, most times in the mock draft, what I do is I try to think the way a general manager would think along with the rest of the people in his organization. And that's clearly why I had Tennessee moving up. And plus, I just can't imagine CJ Stroud sinks like a stone. Do people watch football? I mean, I've really been surprised at, at the sort of the collective trashing of CJ Stroud over the last, say, week. I just figure somebody in here is going to figure out that CJ Stroud is a really good football player, and they're going to take him. I think he'll go somewhere between maybe like 3 and 8, and probably with a trade up. But, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, Peter, I don't think many people watched Ohio State, Georgia. I think that game went under the radar. I'd ultimately fall.
If you watch that game and you have all these 100 questions about CJ Stroud, and you're saying, well, he flunked the S2 test, and 2 weeks ago you never even heard of the S2 test. It's just, I just think it's nonsense. It's draft overkill, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that if anything is probably more just a little bit of hesitance about what an Ohio State quarterback, how ready he is to play, how, what the learning curve is going to be to get to a, NFL level. At least that's what I hear. I have no idea if it's true. So just in a macro sense, when there's this much uncertainty at the top of the draft, one of the things that sort of screams to me is a lot of teams have not committed to choices because there are like deals in principle that may come into play as teams kind of reshuffle and get into the correct order. Because obviously, a team like Arizona, who, according to at least reports, Kyler Murray's stumping for, an offensive tackle. Well, they kind of can't really justify taking one at 3, but they're star player wants one. So, the idea of like all of this uncertainty, to me, I see it as a macro signal that there may be some true surprise trades in the top 10. Do you get that same sense, or is this a year where, again, we make a whole big deal about trades and then nothing materializes?
I don't think there are going to be as many trades as people think. Now, Arizona definitely wants to move down. Atlanta definitely wants to move down from number 8. That doesn't mean they're going to be able to move down, because you need to have a partner who's willing to trade something significant. The most real thing about this draft was told to me by one general manager who said, look, every year, everybody wants to trade down and pick up an extra 2 or 3 or whatever. He said, the problem is on our board, we think that the range from about 15 to 70 is pretty similar players. So we have interest in getting 2s and 3s, no question about it. But most teams in the league don't view the picks around 15, 18, 20, 24 as being so great that it's worth sacrificing a very usable day 2 player, a second or third round player, in order to get in position to do that. My gut feeling is we're not going to see as many trades as we thought we might.
Okay, interesting. Well, if there is a trade, could potentially be for the guy I think is the most tantalizing prospect in the draft, Anthony Richardson, who you had sliding to the Vikings at 23. I guess he's probably the highest ceiling, lowest floor prospect of the quarterback. So it might make sense that in terms of draft position, he's also the highest ceiling, lowest floor.
Yeah.
What's the earliest, Peter, do you think that Richardson could go? And do you think that 23 is about as late as he could go?
I don't think he'll go after 23. I kept looking for a place to get him to go. And Minnesota, which I think at some point the expiration date on Kirk Cousins is going to be activated. He's been there 5 years, made $1 jillion, won one playoff game. He's going to make $1 jillion plus this year. And it's the last year of his deal. If the Vikings want to keep him, do you want to guarantee $45 million in 2024 to Kirk Cousins? I don't know about that. There's one other thing, you ask about, for instance, about the where Anthony Richardson could go. I think there's a very legitimate chance he goes to Seattle at 5. I think they're interested in him. I wouldn't be surprised to see Seattle take a quarterback. So I guess what I would say is, more than anything else, I think Anthony Richardson is a fascinating prospect who probably needs to sit minimum for a year because he just doesn't have the experience to step in and play great football on day one.
Yep, that all makes sense. All right, before we get to the Green Bay Packers, a reminder to download the RotoWorld app to receive breaking player news all season long. Stay ahead of the competition by favoriting players on your roster. Get the latest injury updates, player news, and much more delivered right to your phone. It's available in the App Store today. Okay, so America's national nightmare is over. Aaron Rodgers to the Jets. Australia's national nightmare is over. Planet Earth's national nightmare is over. That is finally done. Peter, you had in your mock yesterday Dalton Kincaid going to the Packers. Do you still think that'll be the case? And do you think that Kincaid will be the first tight end drafted before Michael Mayer?
There's massive love for Dalton Kincaid. My only problem with giving Dalton Kincaid to a middle of the first round pick. Now, look, I had it before the Rodgers trade came out. I would still have Dalton Kincaid at 15 to Green Bay. Now, at 13 to Green Bay with the switch in picks with the New York Jets. The reason that I wouldn't set that in stone for any amount of money is because there are so many good tight ends in this draft. And if you're the Packers and you now have 2 picks in the 40s, you might say, hey, we can get the number 3 tight end in a rich crop of tight ends. We could get the number 3 tight end and we'd be very, very happy and we'd be doing very well. So to me, I think the biggest thing that I look at with Green Bay right now is they're going to come out with a tight end. But this is a team that has 3 picks now in the first 1.5 rounds of this draft. It's rich new territory for them. So I think they may figure they could get the tight end a little bit later. But they and a lot of teams love Dalton Kincaid.
Yeah, I think it was pretty strategic for them to jump the Patriots, who I know for sure would be in the tight end and wide receiver market. That makes total sense. But your point about now having 2 picks in the 40s and there being a lot of, kind of depth at the tight end position is very, very real. Do you get the sense that they would look at pick 13 to take a swing on a wide receiver 1 off the board? Or is that just kind of in general not really in keeping with sort of the Green Bay philosophy?
The Packers haven't done that. The reason why it's such a cool thought right now is how wonderful would it be if the Green Bay Packers, once Aaron Rodgers is out the door, finally took a wide receiver in the first round and, high in the first round, relatively speaking, which Aaron Rodgers has wanted them to do for years. And, 10 minutes after he leaves the building, here comes Jackson Smith-Njigba. And look, I don't know what the Packers are going to do. They do a good job, too, of shutting up before a draft. Jackson Smith-Njigba wouldn't shock me here. I just sort of think that if you can get the guy who's acknowledged as a best tight end versus, and look, I'd have nothing against Jackson Smith-Njigba, but I think he is the best of a mediocre crop of receivers. And Dalton Kincaid is the best of the strongest crop of tight ends in over a decade. I don't know. And, there's no question that Matt LaFleur is going to want a security blanket for the quarterback, for a new quarterback. So I can talk myself in or out of that pick because, again, if you're going to pick, let's say, 43rd and 45th in, overall, you are going to be in position to get the second, third, fourth best tight end on your board. Mm-hmm. So you might just say, we'll just do that.
Can I follow up real quick with your general opinion of Green Bay and sort of it feels like people have kind of fallen all over themselves to, try to find the next team in the NFC who you want as sort of the, top of the board here. A lot of people just, falling all over themselves over the Lions, and the Lions are going to get two very good players in this draft. So I can kind of see how it all makes sense that things might click for them. But do you think that in general, there's still enough talent on Green Bay, and that if they get as good a production out of what they got from Aaron Rodgers last year, or maybe even better, because frankly he wasn't that great last year, that Green Bay could be a little bit of a sleeper this year?
I think it really all depends on two things. Number one, obviously Jordan Love, nobody knows what to think of him at all, and so that's the obvious thing. The second part of it is, to me anyway, their defense, to me, was a big disappointment last year, especially early on. This is the unit that should have been keeping them in games. And I don't think, they certainly weren't great early on. And so to me, I think I want to know right now, in that front seven, you've got 4 number 1 draft picks on that front seven: Rashawn Gary, Quay Walker, Devontae Wyatt, and Kenny Clark. And they just got to play better. That's all there is to it. And if they don't play better, and first of all, I am a buyer in the Detroit Lions in a big way. And, if I right now, if somebody said, who's your dark horse team to get out of the NFC this year? I don't even know if Detroit's a dark horse anymore. They were one of the best 3 or 4 teams in the NFC in the last month of the season last year. And so I know everybody says, well, wait a minute. What about San Francisco and Philadelphia? Okay. Who else is better than Detroit in the last month of last season? Dallas, maybe. I don't know. But anyway, my only point is Detroit's got 5 picks in the first 3 rounds. They've drafted very well in the limited sample of Brad Holmes so far. So, I don't think the Detroit, I understand that there's a lot of bandwagon people on Detroit right now, but in my opinion, for very good reason.
Yeah, right now the Lions are the 4th favorite to win the NFC behind San Francisco, Philadelphia, and Dallas, which you could argue that maybe the Lions should be 3rd. Last one for you, Peter. Is there one team that you're most curious about in round 1? I just got no idea what they're going to do, and most looking forward to their pick.
Well, at the risk of, basically being a little bit of a cliche right now, I think a real fascinating team in the first round is going to be the Atlanta Falcons because, look, there's a few things I know about the first round. It gets harder and harder. The Atlanta Falcons very much want to trade down, very much. if they can trade down and, for instance, move down and still get Bijan Robinson, look at the incredible weaponry that this team would have. Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, Drake London. Add to that the fact that nobody has figured out a way to stop Cordero Patterson yet, and he's about 48 years old. Look at Tyler Algier. He got my vote for Offensive Rookie of the Year last year. He's 1,000-yard back. He's a real grinder of a running back. I just think there are so many things to like about the Atlanta Falcons right now. And if they could trade down from 8, still get Bijan Robinson and pick up another, primetime pick, say second or high third, I really am going to like what Atlanta can do.
Yep. I think the Falcons definitely going under the radar. They were a team that went way over their win total last year, and I guess because they fell out of the race for the playoffs at the end, probably not thought of as much, but certainly they're overachieving. Peter, thank you so much for joining us. Can you let people know what you're going to be working on this week? I know it's going to be a busy week for you.
Well, I used to, in my former days before 2018, when I went to NBC full time and I've just been concentrating on writing my Monday column, I'd be a bee in a beehive right now. And I'd be really working a lot. But, I took the dog for a 2.5-mile walk this morning. I plan to take a nice nap this afternoon. And tomorrow great. I'm going to fly somewhere, and I'm going to do a story for the top of my column. I'd rather not say where, but I'm going to do a story for the top of my column Monday, digging deep into one team. So hopefully it'll work out and I'll be able to give people some insight about the draft that they didn't have otherwise.
I love it.
I like that. Very CIA agent, very Mr. Casario.
Hey, by the way, I wish it was Houston. They pick at 2 and 12.
That'd be quite a story, yeah.
We won't be going to Houston.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Peter, thank you so much for your time and enjoy the week.
All right, Jay, take care. Drew, thank you.
Cheers. All right, there it is, Drew. I got to say, I'm kind of excited for this draft to be done with, just because all of the information and misinformation. It's kind of it's hard to keep up with everything. But any final draft thoughts? Which quickly touch on, the Will Levis going 1 stuff.
Nonsense, complete nonsense. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. He's just moved into plus 175 to go 1 as we're recording, which is a little frightening, but at the same time, it seems to be based off of nothing. But
the lesson is, as always, these markets are extraordinarily illiquid. If one Reddit post and a bunch of $10 bets can move this, then take the market signal with a little bit of a grain of salt. This is not Cowboys have moved to -3 favorites against the Eagles. There's something going on here with Jalen Hurts. Like, this is a very, very different situation as far as I could tell you. And I think Levis, while I need him to go in the top 4 of this draft. I really don't care where. I really don't. As long as he goes in the top 4, we will be happy campers on Friday, Jay. So, but at the same time, I get why it's easy and fun to, create some intrigue, I guess. The Bryce Young stuff came squarely from Adam Schefter. And if you know anything about Schefter, he shares an agent with Bryce Young. So you can pretty clearly connect the dots about where Adam Schefter got his information. And, if the agent and the team, if the agent and the player feel pretty strongly they're going to go to number 1 overall, then that's fine by me. I don't have any strong opinion otherwise. Definitely more of a signal there than a rando on Reddit.
Yes, I think Bryce Young will go 1, though Will Levis, his price has been locked at some sports books, and then he's plus 175 on PointsBet on the screen right now. So hopefully this is fake. I still think it's fake, but I need that man to not go 1. I need Bryce Young to go 1, which I think will still happen. All right, don't forget to check out NBC Sports EDGE for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks for everyone watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. Thank you to Peter King for joining as well. If you're listening to us as a podcast, don't forget to rate and subscribe. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick, we'll see you soon.